What is up, guys? Daniel James here for another video, a vlog, and this video is going to be about the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, or what I like to call the Condonii. Now listen, I'm going to try not to give you guys a history lesson on the Bigfoot, on the Sasquatch. What this video is about, it's a testimonial from me to you to tell you guys that yes, they exist. Yes, they are real beings. And I have had several encounters, meetings, one-on-ones with these beings. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about in this video. I'm really excited about it. I hope you guys keep an open mind and an open heart when it comes to talking about, life on other planets, other forms of intelligent life that we have undiscovered scientifically. That's what this video is about. Now stick around till the end, because I'm going to show you guys my personal findings and my recordings that I've had with these beings. But hang out with me. Don't jump ahead yet, because I'm going to show you the audio. But first, I'm going to tell you what led up to these recordings. So let's dive into this a little bit. The Sasquatch, the Bigfoot. I have had 3 personal encounters with these beings, okay? Now, like I said, I'm not going to get too much into the history of these beings, but I'll tell you what I know. From what I understand, there are about 22 subspecies of what we call the Sasquatch. Different shapes and sizes, ethnicities, subraces. And if you follow Bashar and some other forms of channeling, you'll know that it's said that we share DNA and genetics with the Sasquatch as a species, which actually makes us cousins. And I know that sounds weird to say that not only do we not have any sort of scientific evidence of the existence of these creatures, but to hear that we might actually be related to them in terms of family. I know it's crazy. I have found out that they were seeded on the planet Earth, Mother Earth Gaia, before the creation, the inception of mankind. And they originally come from the Andromedan system. They originate from Andromeda, is where they're seeded from in terms of how they got to this planet. If you follow Bashar and channeling, it's said that in the creation and the hybridization of mankind, the local hominid was Sasquatch, and there was Gigantopithecus. And the DNA and genetics of these beings local to Earth were sampled in the creation of mankind. That's part of what I understand is the creation story of the Homo sapien. And we can get into that in another topic. Check out our podcasts, Celestial Oddities, and That's So Meta, where we talk about these things in a little bit more detail. So the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch, the Condonii. I'm going to dive right into my 3 personal experiences with these beings, okay? Let's get started with number 1. I'm from the West Coast in the States. I was born in Orange County, California, and I lived there for about 7 years. And then I moved to Washington State, the Olympia state capital. And I lived in that area for, I think, about 18 years. If you know anything about Bigfoot, that's a high traffic area for sightings. There's a lot of video recordings and picture and audio recordings and personal encounters and stories with the Bigfoot, the Sasquatch beings in that state. But I personally never had an experience there. I never ran into one. I never saw one while I was driving down the road late at night. I heard stories. I knew people who had met them, but I never had my own personal experience with them. Flash forward to June 2010. Well, I had ended up moving from Washington State. We drove across country to Western New York to stay with my dad. And this was in the Western New York area, Niagara Falls, Youngstown, Lewiston area. And so my partner at the time, her and I had moved in with my dad temporarily until we were able to, find jobs and get on our feet. And right after moving, there was a concert that her and I wanted to go to. It was a metal show in a place called Big Flats. Now, Big Flats was a 3.5-hour drive from where we were living in Youngstown, New York at the time. Mind you, this is June 2010. And we had only been in town for a week. We went to the concert the week after we had moved across country. So my partner and I, we went to the concert, had a blast, great show, and we're driving home, and it's late. I know this is cliche. It's so cliche I can barely say it. But we're driving home. I had a little Geo Prism. It was a red 1990 something Geo Prism. And it was in good shape. It was a workhorse. It had never broken down on me ever. And we leave the concert. We're driving through the hills in the mountains of Big Flats. And these are very, mountainous rolling hills, a lot of forests, a lot of trees, and throughway that cuts through the mountainsides to get back towards Niagara Falls. Well, when we left the concert, it must have been midnight. It was a long concert. It ended late. And when we were coming down the road, we had only gotten about 30 minutes away from the concert. We're driving in the dark, going through the hillsides, as cliche as it can be. My headlights start to dim, and I feel my car getting weaker. The power starts to die, and all of a sudden, the battery goes dead, and we die right in the throughway in the middle of nowhere. So I pull off to the side of the road, and I was like, cool. Our battery definitely died 3 hours from where we live, a week after we had just moved here from across country. There was no problems with the vehicle whatsoever. Suddenly it dies in the middle of nowhere. So my ex and I, my partner at the time, we're almost like laughing at it because we think that it's so stereotypical, like horror film setting, that how perfect, that our car breaks down too far from any of my friends and family to come up and help me this, late at night. So we had passed a rest stop behind us, and it was less than a mile walk, so relatively close. It was just pitch black, and we were on the throughway on the right-hand side going this way. There was a median in the center, and then there was, traffic going the opposite direction. So we sat there in the car, and I called everybody to let them know that we had broken down, and we decided that we should walk to the rest stop and see if anybody might be able to take us into town or maybe give us a jump, something to that effect. So her and I get out of the car, and we decide to just cross the street right where the car was broken down, because I had seen, after sitting there for a while, I remembered that there was one of those gravel turnoffs where a car could turn around, make a U-turn, or cops usually park there. That separates the two directions. I figured, let's cross right there so we can walk on the side of the road that the rest stop is on. So in case anybody going that way already sees us, they might be able to help us, or see that there's two people at 1 a.m. stranded, might need help. But it was pitch black, okay? So we get out of the car, and we can't even see 5 feet in front of us. That's how dark it is. No street lights or anything like that, just trees. And just as we enter the gravel, the loose gravel where the turnaround is, we hear a scuffle right in front of us, and we stopped dead in our tracks, and I grabbed her hand, and she's holding me real close, and we're like, what was that? And all of a sudden you start hearing this breathing, like this deep, deep breath, like these, like a really deep, heavy breath. And you could hear that the mouth was like arguably taller than us. Like to look to where we heard the breathing, we had to look up. And in the moonlight, which happened to be behind us, I could just vaguely make out this shape, okay? A shape in front of us with the breathing. Her and I look at each other like, you see that, right? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to see that. And she's like, what do we do? And I was like, I don't know. But we're like frozen. All of a sudden, whatever this is, it bolts, it just jets from right in front of me, maybe like less than 6 or 7 feet in front of me, to my right, crossing this direction. And you hear it running, okay? And it's so heavy, bipedal, okay? I'm not hearing 4 footsteps, I'm hearing 2 footsteps. You hear this do, 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 like heavy footsteps running past us, one by one with long strides. And her and I are frozen, scared. And it runs across the street towards the direction of where our car is parked and into the woods, like right into the tree line that runs parallel to the thruway we were at. And her and I are panic-stricken. So we run back to the car real quick, get in the car, lock the doors, and we sit there and we're like, that happened, right? You saw that, you heard that. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what could that have been out here in the middle of nowhere at 1 a.m? And I'm like, well, what do you think? I don't know. I don't want to say it. Do you want to say it? She's like, I don't want to say it. I was like, I don't want to say it. So we're sitting here trying to cognize what's happening. Now, mind you, this was in 2010. Okay, and I hadn't gone through my spiritual awakening. I hadn't woken up in that way since 2012. So this was coming from a perspective of fear. I had a very fear-based perspective on what was happening to me because I didn't know the things that I know now after going through my own personal, awakening in consciousness. So I was still very scared, and so was she. So we're sitting in the car now, and we are panic-stricken and broken down and 3 hours from my friends and family. And so we're like, what do we do? We didn't want to sit there in the car because it had ran into the woods right where the car was parked. So her and I discerned that maybe it would be best to just get out of the car and make a beeline for the rest stop and ask for help. And so I discerned that that was the best option as well. So we worked up our courage. We got out of the car, locked it, and her and I decided to walk to the rest stop now on the side that the car is broken down on, which is the side that the creature that had gone to. So her and I are walking, we're very quiet, we're not saying anything, it's pitch black, we can barely see anything other than the light in the distance of the actual rest stop. All of a sudden, we hear it tracing us along the tree line right into the woods. I would say probably about 100 feet into the woods is about what I can discern would be the distance between it and the tree line. So we hear step, crunch, step, walk, in going along the woods at the same speed that we're walking. And I'm like, it's following us. And she's like, I know, shut up, don't talk about it. And I'm like, just hold my hand and let's just keep walking. So picture this, it's dark, we're already spooked. Neither of us really know what's going on, but we think we do, and we hear it tracing us. All of a sudden, I know, as cliche as it sounds, as we hear it walking with us, and we're trying to pretend that it isn't there, it lets out that very specific and succinct howl, that screech that you've seen that you've heard on the travel shows and the History Channel and what the monster hunting shows on TV, or if you're going through YouTube and people post, findings, audio and video from whatever they had encountered. It's that very specific, cannot mistake it for anything else other than a Sasquatch screech. And he lets this howl out so loud, right next to us, 100 feet next to us, that it felt like it cut through my bones. It cut through my very being. When that sound hits you, and you're in the middle of the rolling hills, Big Flats, New York, and you're 3 hours from your friends and family, and you're alone and it's dark, you know in that moment that it cannot be anything other than exactly what it sounds like. It can't be anything other than what your imagination is telling you that it is. And we knew right then and there it was Bigfoot. It's the only creature that makes that sound, that lets off that screech. And it was so loud and so close that we froze. And then in the distance, much further than where we were, we could hear dogs barking. Sounded like 2 or 3 dogs went off. I don't know if there was, maybe some sort of farmhouse nearby, but there were it set dogs off that sounded like way too far for them to have even heard it, but they did. So her and I look at each other real quick in the dark, and I say, go. And we make a run for it. We run across the street, through the grass in the median, get to the rest stop, and we're there safe. And we're freaked out, and we're both freaked out, and we're looking at each other like, that happened, right? Like, I'm not crazy. And I'm like, it happened. That was Bigfoot. It was Sasquatch. We were within 6 feet from it at one point. And I wanted to, I was having a hard time cognizing it. I didn't want to believe that it was right in front of me, but I saw the shape in the moonlight. I heard the breathing. I felt the footsteps, and then I heard the screech. And I thought it was so ironic that I spent, 18 years in a state that's full of sightings and personal experiences, and I never had one. I moved to New York, and 1 week later, I have my first experience with the Sasquatch. And it was so cliche that our battery dies and our car dies in the middle of nowhere. It almost seems too perfect, almost synchronized, right? So that was my first experience with Bigfoot, with the Sasquatch. And at the time, it was hard to believe, but now looking back in retrospect, without a shadow of a doubt, it was an amazing experience, and I'm grateful to have had it. I was scared at the time, but I think it's pretty incredible. Now, flash forward years, I've gone through my spiritual awakening, and I've learned how to channel aliens and higher dimensional beings, and I've gone through so many personal experiences that have changed my perspective on how reality works and how dimensions and densities work. I had taught myself how to become a channeler. And this last summer, my partner Lauren and I, we decided to do a brief channeling series called Today's Guest. We have that series right now. It's here on the channel, and you can just go to the playlist called Today's Guest. In the very first episode, we decided to channel the Sasquatch consciousness. Not so much a specific Sasquatch being, but more so like their collective, their spiritual collective that all races have. They have a collective consciousness. So Lauren and I decided it would be a good idea to channel that energy first. And what I would recommend is go to the video. It's the first episode, and it's called the Condonii. That's what they told us their collective was called when I channeled them. Now, this could be their total collective consciousness. This could be the collective of maybe a species or a subspecies. But check it out if you have a few minutes. Go listen to the audio. I can tell you that it's very deep. There's a lot of emotion. I remembered that when I channeled their energy, I could feel their emotions and their thoughts. I could see their perspective of humanity from their perspective. And there was a lot of emotion. I remember actually crying after the channeling as well to feel how they feel about humanity. So please go check that out and let us know what you think of my channeling of the Sasquatch. They called themselves the Condonii, so that's what we named the episode. Now, flash forward to this year, 2019, it's August. Well, Lauren and I run a creative video service called The Moment Imaging, and my friend Brad Johnson, he had hired us to go to Mount Shasta to film his 10-day retreat, which was called the Spirit Ambassador Retreat. So we flew out there in August, and it was an awesome experience. We learned a lot, gained a lot of fun and exciting stories to share. Shot some awesome video. It was very cool. And we had heard that the locals talked a lot about the Sasquatch community. It turns out that in Redding, California, in the Mount Shasta area, there are so many sightings of Bigfoot and so many interactions with the Sasquatch species that they're actually honored as members of the local society, and there's a Bigfoot Day in Mount Shasta to honor them as local members. It was wild. So our living conditions were separated into two houses because of how many people were there. There was one house that was sort of tucked in the woods at the end of a residential district, which was basically timeshares and things like that and Airbnbs. And then there was the second house where the other half of our party were staying, which was a little bit more towards getting closer towards civilization. We were down at the end of a long driveway that was tucked into a little bit of a surrounding, if you will, of trees and forestry. What I'll do here is if you watch, I'll add some clips of what our property looked like where we were staying, that you can get better scope of what the house was like. So about 5 days into the 10-day retreat, some things started happening. I'm just going to go through these in detail because I'd like to be as descriptive and informative as possible for all of the experiences that we had in Mount Shasta that ultimately led up to probably one of the most amazing sightings that I've ever had in my life. Let's take them step by step, one by one. We had, at the other house that was closer to the city, there was a game room where we had, pool and foosball and pinball machines and air hockey and all that fun stuff. And so after a long day of training and traveling and hikes and things like that, we would all kind of cut loose in the game room and hang out and party and stuff until pretty late. Well, that first night, which would have been about 5 days before the end of the trip, I had come home from the game room by myself in the van. I was like one of the designated drivers of the group. So I had come home from the game night after hanging out with some of the locals at that other house in the party. And I walked up to the porch and I felt called to sort of maybe just sit on the porch for a while and do some stargazing. I wanted to look at the moon and look at the stars. It was very beautiful. Where we live in the city, we don't have awesome nightscapes like they do in Mount Shasta because there isn't as much light contamination from the city. So I'm just gonna sit here and soak it in. I don't get to be out in the woods like this very often, and I just want to collect the energy. So I'm sitting there and I was like, maybe I'll see like a UFO or a spaceship. I'm looking at the stars and I'm not on my phone or anything like that. I'm just soaking it in. And all of a sudden, I hear this slamming sound, like a bang. Now, let me paint a picture for you. There's a long driveway that comes from the main artery road down to where we live. On the immediate left of the house, there was another timeshare. And the two properties were separated by a metal fence. And the driveway that led to the timeshare's house next to us, which was the only residential close to us in our immediate vicinity, had a big metal fence that blocked off their driveway. So I'd seen it 100 times already. I knew exactly where it was. I heard this banging sound and I knew that something had maybe ran into the fence, fucking animal in the dark or something. I don't know, but something clearly hit this metal fence really hard. And I was like, so I go about my business, pretend like it didn't happen. I ignored it, go back to stargazing, right? All of a sudden, bang, it hits it again. I was like, that was deliberate, but I'm gonna pretend like I didn't hear that. Go back to stargazing one more time, right? At this point, it's getting a little deliberate. I'm starting to feel like this is happening on purpose. And a third time, bang, something slams on this fence. Now, it sounded like a giant stick or a rock hitting a metal fence. And I didn't want to cognize it. I didn't want to lean into the fact that I was out there at 12:30 in the morning, that's what time it was, in the dark, sitting on the porch in Mount Shasta while all of my other guests here in this side of the party were asleep. I didn't want to accept that something was hitting the fence literally too close for my comfort. But I knew after 3 definitive hits that there was something out there that had hit the fence. Thought it was interesting. Went inside, took a shower, went to sleep. Flash forward to the next day. Some guests are saying that there were rocks, at the other house. There were rocks and stuff placed on the windowsill outside of their bedrooms on the second floor of the house, which I thought was very strange. They were saying, there were some mediums and things like that in the party. They were saying that they were feeling Sasquatch energy that was very present. And after what I'd experienced that last night, I would have to agree. So, flash forward to the next night. This, I believe, would be 6 days into the trip. This is where things get a little cray-cray. Bear with me. We all do game night. This time there are more people at game night. And we were all out pretty late. So we get home at about 12:30, maybe 1-ish in the morning. We all go to bed. I was very tired. I had a healing session by some of the local energy healers that had come to the event with us, and I was wiped out by it. I was tired. I was physically and mentally and emotionally exhausted from this healing session. I was very tired that night. So I went home after the healing and game night and went to sleep. Well, it was summer, it was warm, and the air was very fresh, so we had all the windows of our bedroom open on the second floor. We were on the far side of the house, and then the other group was on the other side of the house. All of a sudden, Lauren, she starts shaking me. She shakes me, rattles me awake. And I'm disoriented. I'm still very drained from the healing session that I had. And I open my eyes, my ears, and I hear, it sounds like someone's on the back porch, like cleaning or something. It sounded like somebody like sweeping or angrily just moving stuff around. And I was half asleep, very disoriented. I couldn't really make out what it was, and I was too tired to kind of care, if I'm honest. But I heard pounding and banging on the house, on multiple different sides of the house. And it was a little concerning. It was a little disorienting. If I was more awake, I literally would have got up and gone down there and said, what's going on? Like, what's the scoop? I gotta be honest with you. I fell back asleep. I was too tired to wake up, and even Lauren was concerned. I passed out and woke up the next morning, and our guests who were on the other side of the house, they sat us down and they're like, yo, we gotta talk. Something happened last night. And I was like, okay, like what's up? I heard some banging, but I couldn't wake up to investigate what's going on. So a buddy, a friend of mine that I made, Alexi, who interestingly enough lives in Olympia, Washington, where I spent 18 years, had come from Washington to the retreat, you know, from my hometown, which I thought that was cool. He was up. They were all woken up on the other side of the house, which faced the garage. And he said that something was banging on the garage door, banging on the windows, and hitting the house. It sounded like maybe things were being thrown at the house as well. And they heard grunting and moaning and vocalizations, and that it was definitive that something was literally just attacking the house. And I was like, you know what, I heard it, but I couldn't wake up. And now I'm so frustrated that I didn't get up and go investigate, because I'm brave like that nowadays. Knowing what I know now, I'm not afraid. And so I'd have gone right out there and be like, whoa, yo, what up? But I slept through it, and that pissed me off. So it was so definitive for them that before we started class that morning, we had a big meeting about it, that the house was like attacked by the locals. I was frustrated that I couldn't wake up, you know, but knowing what I know now, I would have gone out there and be like, yo, what up? But I slept through it. And so the next morning, it was such a definitive experience for everybody on the other side of the house that we had a meeting about it. You know, we do the classes in the morning, and then we do field trips and yoga and meditation. And we did a whole, group session about the experiences that they had, what they heard that night. So flash forward to game night again. This became a ritual of ours. Alexi comes from a background of the Sasquatch, and he's from a tribe. We're both Native. I'm Blackfoot Native American, and Alexi is Native as well. And he was part of a tribe who said that they had open contact with a clan of Sasquatch, and I think in Alaska, I believe. And so he was very open to the experiences, and I said, yo, Alexi, what do you say we get a little crazy? And when everybody goes to bed, when we get home from game night, why don't we go out down the road and into the woods a little bit and see if maybe we can do some calls and some vocalizations and see if they're out there, if we can have some sort of interaction. She goes, yeah, I would love that. So we did that, and Alexi and I went out by ourselves, left our phones at home so that if the beings were there, they wouldn't be offended or scared by our technology. And we go out there and we start doing some calls. And as we're walking down the road that goes to the main artery road down our long driveway, we hear something running. Sounds like it's on all fours. Heavy, that heavy thud in the grass, run through the bushes. And we stopped and listened, and it went into the woods a little bit. So we heard something very, very definitive that there was a presence there. Now, we had seen some deer and things like that, but it was not a deer. The footsteps were too heavy and dense. there was too much weight to the way that it moved. So I was like, dude, we got a Squatch. If you guys ever seen that show, like when they hear like something in the woods, they're like, we got a Squatch. Like it was like that. So we do some calls and some claps, and all of a sudden in the woods, I don't know how far, a couple 100 feet into the woods, we hear a knock on a tree. And we're like, you heard that, right? And it's like, yeah. Now there weren't any residentials close enough for us to, for that to have been a person awake at 1 a.m. The couple who was next to us, they were an elderly couple, and they weren't really around much at all. So we knew that there was something there that was making noise. So we did some vocalizations and some talking. One of the contact protocols that I've studied when it comes to making extraterrestrial contact is you have to release your fear. If you have too much fear, they may not reach out to you, they may not connect with you, because if they're benevolent, peaceful, loving beings, they don't actually want to scare you or hurt you in any way. So if you're putting off too many fear vibrations, they're not going to make their presence known. So he and I made sure that we cleansed our energy, and we stated that we were open to this connection, we were open to this experience, we were welcoming to have open contact with these Sasquatch creatures, and that if they were there to make their presence known. And then we heard another knock in the woods, and we thought that was pretty amazing, and then it went quiet. So we went back in the house, and I said, yo, dude, I'm pretty sure that, you know, with the running around out there and the knocking in the woods, we got a Squatch. So I said, I'm going to leave out some food. There was a big tree. Here, I'll post a clip or a video. There was a big tree right in front of the porch of our house with gravel around it. I cleared the gravel flat so that if there were going to be any footsteps, I would be able to see definitive footsteps in the dirt. And I put out a handful of chips, a handful of grapes, and I put them right at the base of the tree. So we go to bed, wake up the next morning. The first thing I do is, by the way, we didn't hear anything banging on the house that night. I go out and I check, and the chips are gone and the grapes are gone. And there are giant foot tracks in the dirt. Giant Sasquatch, like feet-shaped scuffles all over the gravel. And I was like, that's pretty definitive. So we know that they like chips and they like grapes. So flash forward to the next night. We have our day, we have game night. Alexi and I decide, let's do another night. So we go out and we do some more calls and some vocalizations. And we're not getting any response. We're not hearing anything like we did the night before. So Alexi gets a little brave, and he says, why don't we go into the woods a little bit and stand under a tree? And I'm like, okay. if you're comfortable with that, let's do that. So we go sit under 2 different trees that's a little bit away from the driveway. And we're not hearing anything or seeing anything. I'm feeling a presence, but I'm not seeing it or hearing any knocks. So Alexi and I are talking and bullshitting, and we're getting to know each other, and we're really vibing and just having a good time, but we're not having any experiences. So we're thinking about calling it a night. All of a sudden, Alexi looks over to his right, and he said that he saw a giant arm that was leaning on a tree branch. That must have been like 8 or 9, maybe even 10 feet tall. And he said as soon as he saw it, it pulled its arm away into the shadows. But we didn't hear any running off or any scuffling or any footsteps. He just saw a giant arm move. And he said, he's like, Dan, I promise you, it's right there. And it was 15 feet. I didn't see anything. We didn't hear anything. We thought that was strange. So we did some calls. We tried talking to it. Nothing. So it was getting late. So he and I decided to call it a night. We go in the house. I say, look, I'm going to leave out some more food. See if we can get them to come to the porch and eat. So I left out more chips and a slice of bread. Just a regular piece of bread. And I check first thing in the morning, more footprints. The chips are gone this time, and the bread had the crust perfectly peeled off, almost like it was cut. It was like a straight, perfect cut off the bread. Wasn't nibbled on by any animals, wasn't torn or bit into. It was peeled off very precisely and left. So I was like, okay, Sasquatch don't like bread, they like chips. Flash forward the next day, we go to the store. So I said, you know what? I'm going to buy some things specifically for them to see what they might like. I get some chocolate and some more fruit. And flash forward to that night. Alexi and I go out, we do our thing. This time we went to the backyard. We thought that maybe we might be able to provoke a different response for them, since the night prior we hadn't had any experiences other than Alexi seeing the arm pull away. So we sat on a blanket in the backyard meditating, and we probably did this for like a good 40 minutes. We were doing breathing techniques, we were talking, we were having moments of silence. We were trying to imagine ourselves, like the law of attraction, sort of having an experience or an encounter. And nothing, no footsteps, no movement. I felt the presence, but I didn't see anything. So we were thinking about, maybe should we call it a night? And then we're like, well, why don't we go back to the front yard where we have had activity? Let's go down the road a little bit and see if we can provoke any responses. And before we call it a night. So we're walking back to our usual spot where we had been going. And to our left-hand side, in the neighbor's property where I had heard the banging on the fence a couple nights prior, we're hearing footsteps in the grass and in the woods to our left. So we stopped and we listened, and we're like, okay, we definitely have some activity over here. We have some movement. Let's keep going to our usual spot where we had been going and see what happens. So we turn and we're facing the woods from the road, from the driveway, and we're doing some vocalizations and calling out, saying peaceful things and putting out good vibes. And we hear a knock, like a tree branch or a rock hitting a tree. And we're like, that's good. That's definitive. So we clap back. Clap, 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 5 claps. Then we hear 3 knocks back. 1, 2, 3. Definitive 3 knocks. We're like, okay, that's open contact. That is direct communication with an intelligent creature that is here in the woods with us. It felt amazing. We got like these energy buzz and excitement rush over us, like we're communicating with a Sasquatch right now. Now, I don't know what the knocks meant. I didn't know what the knocks mean at the time, so I was just clapping 5 times. Alexi had told me that there's this popping sound that they make with their hands, where they cup their hands like this, and they pop air actually into their mouths, and it makes this loud popping sound. When he said that, it triggered me, because when I was a kid, this is a true story, when I was a kid, I used to make that same popping sound with my mouth. Fucking annoying. I did it in school to piss off my teachers, and I did it at home to piss my mom off, because like I was that dude when I was young. And it was funny. I could do it so loud that my mom would be like, Daniel, stop. She'd like yell at me. It was really funny. But I thought it was weird that he said that they made this popping sound with their hands, and that I've been doing it since I was a kid. So I was like, bro, this is my destiny, okay? I was made to make that popping sound. Hold my beer. Step aside. About to, you know what I'm saying? About to do this thing. So I make the popping sound. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They respond right back with 3 more knocks. 1, 2, 3. Now I thought it was strange what the three knocks were, because sometimes they would do 1 knock, sometimes they would do 3. So that to me seems specific, deliberate, but I don't know what the knocks meant, so I just kept doing 5 knocks. So we went back and forth like that for a while, communicating with the popping and the clapping. It's getting late, so Alexi and I decide, okay, this is amazing. We have open contact, we're having communication, but they're not coming out of the woods and approaching us, and we didn't feel like we should go in and approach them. I didn't want to be disrespectful to them. I didn't want them to think that I was encroaching or being aggressive in any way. And I didn't know what the 3 knocks meant, so we call it a night. I go inside, I put out the food again, put out the chocolates and another pile of chips, I think. And I place the chocolates all around the trees. And put them off the ground so that other animals couldn't get them and things like that. Put the chips where they had been leaving them. So flash forward, no banging on the house, no activity in that way. And we wake up in the morning. First thing I do is I go out and check, and the chips are gone. The chocolate is there. Turns out the Bigfoot does not like chocolate. Who'd have known? I didn't know, but they ate the chips. And so I thought that was amazing. More footsteps, but fewer footsteps this time. Each night there were less and less footsteps in the dirt. Whereas like the first nights that we were having activity, it seemed like there was maybe more than one of the beings, but then as the nights went on progressively further, there were like only a few footsteps in the dirt. So here's the cool part. Check this out. Are you still with me, or did you skip ahead to listen to the audio? Check this out. Sticking up out of the dirt, right where I had been leaving the food every night, was this piece of wood, okay? This is what I call a wood chip, if you will. It is a chip of wood, okay? And if you look, if I can get my camera to focus on it, if you look at the wood chip, it's actually burnt, okay? There is marks on it that show me that it has been burnt, okay? It's thin. The other side is not burnt, which I find to be strange. This side has charcoal bits on it, and there was actually more charcoal bits, but I had put it in my pocket at one point to show other members of the house, other guests. And so there was more burn marks on it, but they had fallen off. So this wood chip, okay, was sticking up out of the dirt right where I had left the food, and it was wedged down into the dirt with force, as if it had to have been worked into the dirt, because the ground was relatively solid, okay? So it wasn't like it fell out of the fucking tree and it landed like that. It had to get forced in there, okay? I didn't know how to interpret this. My first instinct was that it was some sort of offering. Maybe it was some sort of gift. When I used to go feed seagulls, I used to feed the birds with my mom in Olympia, Washington. And every once in a while, they would bring us stuff. When we would give them bread, they'd bring us gifts in return, almost like as if they were saying thank you. And I would always keep these little mementos as gifts from them. They'd bring them right up to me and drop them at my feet. It's pretty amazing, like clods of dirt and stuff like that. So I assumed that this was like a thank you or a peace offering from the Sasquatch of saying thank you for the food. I understand you're leaving this specifically for me, so here is something for you. Now, I told the other local mediums who were in the group, and they were trying to tap into the energy of the wood chip. And one of them said that it was a type of technology, that they had left it deliberately, not as an offering for me to say thank you, but that it was maybe some type of tool. And that's also why it was burnt, because you know, like I said, there's clearly charcoal on it. So we assumed that it was designed to do something. And then I was like, technology, hey? It is a wood chip of wood chip, like a microchip. So it got me thinking, okay, maybe if it is some sort of technology. So flash forward, game night, everyone goes to sleep. Alexi and I are back out there in the woods to do our thing. We bring the chip with us, and we didn't know what to do with it, how to activate it. I was like waving it around, you know, making circles with it, you know, making patterns with it. We put it back in the dirt. We were trying to use it to maybe summon or manifest or provoke the beings to come. Didn't have that effect. We actually didn't have really any experiences that night again, which I found to be strange because, you know, some nights we had a lot of activity and other nights we had little to none. So we had the wood chip. I could not get it to do anything special, open a fucking portal or anything. You know what I'm saying? Like nothing happened. So I went back to just assuming that it was some kind of gift or peace offering saying thank you. And flash forward that night, I leave out more food. I leave out more fruit, more chocolate. And I get a little experimental. So I says, Alexi, I want to try something. With your permission, because he and I had become partners at this point, you know, like almost friends in this journey of trying to have open contact with the Sasquatch species. I wanted to see what he felt about this. I says, Alexi, what do you say I set up an audio recorder? I'll place it in the window on the inside of the kitchen that overlooks the porch and the gravel and the tree where I had been leaving the food. So if we capture any movement, or if any animals or any creatures come by that night, this recorder is going to hear it. He goes, I think that'd be okay. You know, I respect that. That sounds like a good idea. Let's do it. So we take the audio recorder, set it up together on the inside of the screen of the kitchen, and face it to where the food is in place so that we can capture any activity. Flash forward that night, that will put us at, I believe, Saturday. I think it was a Saturday afternoon. So flash forward to that morning, we checked the audio recorder and it had been recording all night. It was still running when I checked it in the morning. I was like, awesome. You know that if we got a Squatch, it's on this recorder. So I changed out the battery. We were actually going to do a quick training in the morning and then go off for a field trip. And this gets good. I hope you're still here with me, because this gets good. So I said, let's run the recorder again all day while we're gone for the field trip and see if anything comes back to the house while we're all gone. So we leave, come back, check the recorder, it's still going. Game night again. Here's where it gets good. Okay, this is Saturday night. We all left, I believe, technically Sunday night, Monday early in the morning. Most of us were flying out on Sunday or Monday morning early. We're having one more game night at the second house, and I've got a car full of people, a van full of people, and I was the driver. So you got me in the driver's seat, you got Lauren in the passenger seat, and then we have Robert, Alexi, and a few other people were in the back seat. And here's what happened. It's late. It's about 12:30. Going down the road. I've got my high beams on. And we're going through the residential that leads to the turnoff on our driveway. And all of a sudden in front of us, in the headlights of the car, I see a full Sasquatch running down the road, literally right in front of our driveway that we have to turn off of to go down the road. This is where it gets weird. I go, here we go, guys, here we go. We've been talking about Bigfoot all week. Everyone's in a Bigfoot frenzy. Everyone's having weird experiences and hearing our stories every morning that we're telling people about what our findings are. And he's large. He's running down the road away from us. And I promise you that I'm telling the truth, with 6 people to vouch for the story, that all of a sudden, he comes down to all fours, gorilla style. He's running on all fours, and then it begins to shapeshift. Before our eyes, I watch it go from a bipedal upright Sasquatch into what looked like to be a wolf, a very large wolf. A tail, a big bushy tail starts to form out of the back. The color of the hair gets a little bit lighter than the color of the Sasquatch. And as it shapeshifts into what looked like to be a very large wolf, still running down the road in front of the vehicle, it shapeshifts again, transforms, if you will, into a black bear, okay? The tail disappeared, the shape of the body disappeared, and it is now a relatively small black bear. And we are all watching this happen before our very eyes, because as soon as I saw it, I called it out. Everyone leaned around the seats to look. And as it turns into the black bear, it's running down the road, and then it stops, and it looks back at us, like staring us down, like, what's up? What's up? And I'm like, you guys fucking see this, right? It's happening. And they're like, yeah. And I look at Lauren and she's like, right? So the strange thing are these two elements, as if this isn't strange enough. It's the only thing that didn't shapeshift properly when it changed form 3 times was its feet. it still had these giant Sasquatch feet on the body of a black bear, which we thought to be really, really awkward to look at. And what the other people in the car said that they saw when it shapeshifted was, it wasn't like a movie style mutation. It was more like when, if you was to take two pictures and lower the opacity of one and lay them on top of each other so they're kind of opaque, almost like holograms, blending into different shapes and sizes and colors. Less of like a mutation, like a human to a werewolf, and more of just like different patterns changing. That's what it looked like to us. Full-bodied Sasquatch transforms into what looked like to be a wolf with a big bushy tail, shapeshifts again into a black bear that still has Sasquatch feet. Then he stares me down in the middle of the road. I'm like, you know what, bro? I'm gonna turn off right here. I'm gonna take my people home. I'm gonna think about this for a minute. You're gonna give me a minute to cognize this, because that happened. And we all have, you know, people in the car to sort of confirm that for us. Pretty amazing. So, as this is Saturday night, our last night there, technically our last night there, Alexi and I decide to come out one more time, go to our regular spot down the road, and see what happens. So Alexi and I go down the road to our usual spot in the driveway, which is about halfway in between the house and the main artery road where we saw the Sasquatch that night. And we start feeling this buzzing sensation. We're feeling strange. The air is dense. And we start hearing this humming sound. Mind you, it's about 1 a.m. We're hearing this loud vibrational humming sound. And it was honestly a little uncomfortable. It didn't sound very pleasant or inviting. It sounded mechanical, supernatural, paranormal, whatever you want to call it. And it was loud, and it was coming from the distance, which would have been actually towards where the other houses were down the road. So I thought that was even a little bit more strange. And it was so loud, the buzzing was so succinct, that we thought any minute we were going to see a big spaceship come over the tree line or something, because that's how foreign it sounded. We wait a while, and the buzzing starts to go away. Alexi and I do our calls, our popping sound, and nothing. No knocks back, no response. We're waiting and waiting. We're almost getting a little concerned that maybe like the bear will come back or the Sasquatch bear will come back. Nothing happened that night. A little disappointing. So flash forward the next morning, I had put out some more food, and the chips were gone, and I put out chocolate again. They didn't take the chocolate. So we went back out to our spot that we had meditated under the trees, and we walked around in the dirt in the woods a little bit, where whenever we did the calls and we heard them knocking back, we wanted to kind of be where they were and investigate a little bit. So Alexi and I went out there, and what we found was a large mound of dirt. Just dirt from somebody doing some sort of excavation or something behind the properties where there was another residential at the very end of the driveway that was empty. There was no one staying there. And there were giant pine cones, okay? Like they were like this long, this big, and they were hard, very solid. The spines, they were hard, okay? They were laying all over the ground out there. Well, right on top of this dirt mound, one of those had been picked apart into tiny little pieces, pulled apart and left into a pile, okay? The spines, the little, I'm sorry, I don't know what they're called, but the pieces of the pine cone, they were very hard, almost like a shell. They were in a pile on top of the dirt mound, and the strange thing is the core of it, that almost looked like a corn on the cob that had been eaten, was a couple feet away. Now, this isn't an animal eating the pine cones, because they're like rock solid. They're very hard. And you know what? I actually have these little pine cones here. These are from Mt Shasta, from our property we took, but they were shaped like this, but they were hard, and they were like, you know, very large. So it was strange that the pine cone had been picked into little pieces and left in a pile, and then the core of it was a couple feet away. And if you would have asked me to grab one of these and try to pull it apart myself, I couldn't. That's how hard and solid these giant pine cones were. You know, it would have taken something like a being like that with very large, strong hands to tear that thing apart. Not even an animal would have done that. And it was just one. They weren't all over the place. It wasn't like something common. It was very local to that one pine cone. So Tim, our buddy Tim, hi Tim, miss you. Tim and Robert came out and investigated with us. We looked for tracks and I showed them the pine cone and talked about our experiences, and we went about our business that day. They were all leaving the next day, so we were all still around. And that night was our last night there, and this is where everybody was parting ways and saying their goodbyes, and some people had already left on that Sunday. Well, Lauren and I were supposed to leave with one of the other guests to the Reading airport at like 4 in the morning on Monday. So we were still there for one more night. And Lauren was too tired to come out and do any investigating with Alexi. But also at the same time, it was kind of mine and Alexi's thing. Like we had bonded over, you know, going out there in the woods by ourselves and connecting to nature and having these experiences. And Lauren, you know, just she wanted to sleep. So it was our thing. So that last night I said, when we got up really early at like 2 or 3 in the morning to go to the airport, I said, do you want me to take you out to our spot and see if we have any experiences, any encounters? I felt kind of bad that she hadn't gotten to experience anything herself. So I offered to take her out, and she said, I would love that. So please bring me with you. I'd love to have any sort of experience like you guys had after seeing what we saw in the van. So the other guest who was coming with us on the airplane, she hadn't gotten up yet or gone out of the house. So I took Lauren down the road, and as we were walking to the regular spot that Alexi and I had been frequenting, to our left, back at the other timeshare, where the elderly people had been staying and were gone, where I'd heard the banging on the fence, we heard footsteps out in the darkness. So we stopped, and we didn't even get 25 feet from the door of the house when we heard that. We didn't even have to go down to where Alexi and I had been going regularly. And we stopped and go, they're here. I could feel their presence. It felt very peaceful, very welcoming. And I said, wait. So I did my pops. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And immediately we got 3 knocks back on what sounded like to be a tree. 1, 2, 3. And I saw sweet little Lauren's face just light up. She was so happy to have heard that with her own ears and felt that energy. And I was so happy that they responded the way that they did, so succinctly and so specifically responding to my calls. And so I said, thank you. I just closed my eyes and put my hand on my heart. And I said, thank you for these experiences and for making your presence known to me and making contact. And I told them that I loved them. And Lauren and I went back in the house, got our bags, we loaded up, and we left. So that was the end of it. So there you have it, folks. Those are my 3 experiences with the Sasquatch, Bigfoot, or what we are now calling the Condonii. I had my experiences, in Big Flats, New York in 2010, when my car broke down in the middle of nowhere in the dark. I have had the channeling experience where we communicated with them. Pretty powerful information. I would love for you to go listen to that. And then we have the 5 days of 5 nights of experiences in Mt Shasta in August 2019. Now, the moment maybe some of you have been waiting for. I am going to show you a montage, a compilation of my audio findings from that night that we set up the audio recorder and recorded them while they were eating the food and things like that. I'm just going to give you a real quick, brief summary of what we heard. I got footsteps. I have knocking and banging on stuff. I have some very, very short vocalizations right by the recorder. I can hear them eating the chips. There was a train station, not a station, but there was train tracks just a couple blocks from where we lived. And I actually heard when the train went by, you can hear another Sasquatch howling at the trains every time a train goes by. Okay? You're going to hear these things. Now, what I find to be the most entertaining and probably the most amazing audio recording that we captured that night over the course of, I think, like 9 hours of audio I ran. The Sasquatch was one. There was only one that came out, and it spent the whole night, because I have audio recordings of about 7 hours worth. Okay? It was marking its territory around the front yard. Now, don't ask me how this is possible, but you can literally hear it peeing over and over and over again for about 1 hour and 20 minutes straight. I have the recordings. I don't know what to tell you. I don't even know, in terms of physics, how any living being can pee that many times in a row for 1 hour and 20 minutes. It would pee, take a couple steps, pee again, take a couple steps, pee again, and it did that for 1 hour and 20 minutes. Don't ask me. I just work here. So listen, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you very much for being here with me and listening to my stories, listening to me ramble about the weird shit that I'm into. The audio recordings are going to go ahead and start now. But the last thing I want to tell you before I go ahead and check out is I do have a paranormal podcast called Celestial Oddities, Pair of Normal Guys. We did a whole episode on cryptids, and it mostly centered around the Sasquatch species. And my partner Garrett, he did a lot of research on the beings and had a lot to offer, a lot of value to give in that episode. So I'm going to go ahead and link that episode here in the description down below. So if you're interested, go ahead and check out that podcast episode where we talk more about the Sasquatch and I share some aspects of the story again. And then let me know what you think of the audio. I've turned the volume up and I made it a montage for you guys. Let me know what you think. Check it out. Thank you for being here with me. And what can I say? The Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, the Condonii, they're real. And I believe that I have connections to them. And I have every intention of meeting them again. Face to face someday. Who knows? Thanks, guys.